Let's talk about Graham Platner, shall we? So, Graham Platner is a guy running for the Senate in Maine, a Democrat. He spent the last several months getting huge amounts of positive attention uh, around the country from liberals who loved his story. A Marine who is now an oyster farmer, never ran for office before, young, 41 years old. He raised $3.5 million for his campaign. He got endorsed by Bernie Sanders. Everything was going right for Graham Platner right up until it wasn't. So Graham Platner's last week has been an absolute nightmare. So the first thing we learned is that he had written a whole bunch of comments on Reddit that ran the gamut, but were offensive in all sorts of ways. So he had referred to himself as a socialist and a communist, never just absolute fodder for opposition researchers. He had minimized sexual assault in the military. He had said white people from Maine were stupid and racist. Never great when you are running to be elected from Maine. Now, Platner said that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from his time in the military and was in a really dark place. And those comments didn't represent who he was now. And hope that people would accept him for what he was. Okay, so that in a vacuum is not great. It's problematic, but there was more. So on Tuesday, it came out. So Platner was on Pod Save America, a very popular podcast on the left. And he sort of backed into revealing that he has on one side of his chest, he has a skull and crossbones that looks a whole lot like the skull and crossbones that the Nazis sort of adopted in Germany in the last century. Platner, I think, was trying to get ahead of another controversy here about the tattoo, basically saying, I have this. I got it when I was drunk in Croatia, when I was in the Marines. I never knew what it meant. But it didn't work, right? So this then became the second gigantic national controversy surrounding Graham Platner in the space of a week. He has now said he's going to get it removed. He had to give a quote that is never a quote you want to give when you're running for office, which is, quote, "I'm not a secret Nazi." Yeah. So this is about Graham Platner, but it's also more broadly about running for office. So let me talk about Graham Platner in particular, and then we'll talk more broadly about running for office. So look, it is not a coincidence that all of this negative stuff about Graham Platner is coming out just as Janet Mills, who is the sitting Democratic governor, has announced her plan to run for the Democratic nomination. Obviously, Mills people who want Mills to win, or at least don't want Platner to win, had a whole bunch of opposition research that they were sitting on. And they are using the opposition research. They are just dumping it on Graham Platner now. To, I think, probably push him out of the race, and it may well work. He is in a rough spot right now. He can stay in, but he's been significantly reduced as a candidate. So that's, I think, what's happening here is that this is an opposition research dump. Platner, which is how politics works. Platner, if he didn't want opposition research dumped on his head, he shouldn't have posted things on Reddit or got a tattoo that a lot of people associate with the Nazis. Platner, by the way, said he's getting the tattoo removed or he's putting something over it, or, he's going to do something. Anyway, so this in Maine is clearly about the primary. Janet Mills, who I now think is the clear front runner, given Platner's struggles, even if he stays in the race. But it's also, I think, about the perils of falling in love with a candidate who you don't know all that much about. I think right now both parties want outsiders. And I think that makes sense because Washington is not popular. People who have been politicians for a long time are not most people's first choice to come to Washington and be politicians longer. But here's the thing about having been a politician for a while. You've been vetted, right? So Janet Mills was the attorney general in Maine for 8 years. She's coming up in 8 years as the governor. There are bad stories out there about her, but everybody knows them already. Do you know what I mean? Or we think we know them. if you haven't run for office before, if you are a Graham Platner, yes, you are appealing like an oyster farmer who served in the Marines, who's just decided he's fed up with his country and his party and he wants to run for office. Right. I get that that's an appealing profile. The problem is you've never run for anything before, which means you might not have been considering running for anything before, which means you probably posted stuff online or did stuff that you shouldn't have done. Now, not every candidate who's never run for anything before and is running as an outsider has like a skull and crossbones that the Nazis used to use tattooed on them, or, said that the people of their state are stupid and racist, right? I mean, that's unique to Platner. But in this day and age where everybody who grew up, in the last 25 years has everything online, there's always going to be some stuff. And I think that's the danger. It's like, yes, it's appealing because he's an outsider, but outsiders oftentimes come with baggage. Now, for some people, including Bernie Sanders, he said, look, I'm still with Platner. Like, I think he's going to win the race. For some people, this stuff might not matter. And you might see this as, well, it's just opposition research, and this is just the establishment being paranoid about being challenged. Okay. But I will say, I mean, the bloom is off the rose for Graham Platner. This is no longer this candidacy with lots of momentum. This is a candidacy where people are now saying, is he going to continue in the race? So I think you have to be careful of what you wish for. I understand the appeal of outsiders. At the same time, outsiders come with these sorts of stories and this sort of baggage. So we'll see what happens in Maine. I don't know, honestly. I mean, like, in the world where Donald Trump is president, I'm not sure Graham Platner has to drop out of the race, but I do think he's diminished. So we'll see. But stay tuned, and I ask you to do one thing, which is hit that subscribe button. You'll get free content just like this every day. I'll continue to grow as an independent news creator. Take care.